I thought I'd make a quick video to describe some of the mounting options that I've been using and looking at for mounting in my Mooney, uh, many of which should be applicable to a Piper or some Beechcraft where you can remove the clock that's embedded in the yoke. But for now, most of us have been using iPads for the last several years. Your favorite applications, Garmin Pilot or WingX. Many of us use ForeFlight, as I'm showing here, and these have been phenomenal. We've been able to get rid of the portable mount GPSs we've been using, and more so with the plates that are available, been able to ditch things like our Jeppesen subscriptions and GPS updates. So the cost of ForeFlight a year is now maybe $160, maybe up to $180 with all of the subscriptions, significantly less than the thousands we used to spend for Jeppesen subscriptions and GPS updates for our panel mounts, which are now significantly cheaper thanks to competition. You can buy essentially then a new iPad every year if you choose, and continue to work with it. But what I've been doing, because of the limited space in a Mooney Cockpit, is using an iPad mini mounted to the yoke with the RAM mounts that most of us have been using. But what I've found over the last year, many of us have been upgrading to larger phones, iPhone 6 Plus in my case, and mounting an entire iPhone with this big clunky set of RAM mounts that by themselves weigh 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds seems really out of the question. So it got me thinking about other alternative options. And at least in a Mooney Cockpit, there isn't a lot of room. I can carry now instead an iPhone that I use for primary reference mounted on the yoke was my desire, and then use a larger iPad in my lap when I need to look something up. And pretty much retire this iPad mini version 1 and go forward. So what options were available? Well, I started thinking about just using the RAM mounts. People have removed this basically plastic fascia plate on a Mooney and mounted in instead something mounted to this underneath metal plate, which can be removed, and you can do all kinds of options. Piper is similar, and so is a Beechcraft. Cessna, we'll take a look at one and see if there's other options. But I didn't like any of the RAM mounting options. I looked at several auto mounts, and instead started looking at some what's become more ubiquitous now with Gopro mounts. A lot of us have several GoPro mounts laying around. There's some cheap alternatives. But instead of just taking up some GoPro mounts and mounting it, I decided to go one step further and do some 3D printed parts and see how that comes out. So I'll show you what that looks like now and some options I'm looking at along with the other parts of the installation. So looking through Thingiverse, most of you who have 3D printers certainly spend a lot of time there. I was able to find just generic GoPro mount fittings. Pretty much you can customize to your heart's desire. I printed a few up here. In addition, there's several phone mounts you can use. This one was for an iPhone 6 Plus, which can fit with a thin leather case like I have on my phone, and I'll show you a photo of that later. And I just decided to print these up as prototypes. It's kind of amazing. I was originally thinking that I would just use some of the standard GoPro mounts, but the print quality of this was so good, you can't quite see it here, but I can easily build parts that slide and replicate the whole thing. These were all printed at home on my $350 3D printer with some upgrades, I might say. This is using PETG, which is a flexible TPU, mount. It's not TPU, but it's a flexible plastic which has high melting point. Standard PLA plastics people use for printing are very brittle and have a low melting threshold, and people who've printed up in cockpit solutions before have noted that if they leave their plane in the sun, they'll come back and they'll be melted. This is a much higher melting point and is flexible enough for its purpose and fits pretty well. So this is a prototype version, and I'll show you how I intend to mount this together. Essentially, I found a GoPro base mount with a bolt hole through, originally intended for a tripod. We'll mount that and then mount to the back of that, basically the handle that goes in, and this will be glued on. When I'm done with the final prototype, the plate will instead be, once I determine exactly how I want to mount it, I'll epoxy that in place, and then I'll go back home and print the final version, which will fuse together the back mount with the GoPro mount when I know what I want. And before I mount this in the plane, I thought I'd just show you the assembled unit. This will accept my iPhone 6 Plus with a thin leather case. This mount clips into the yoke, which I just showed you, and there's an articulated mount which will bend and be adjustable in position. Currently, I've just epoxied this on, but I intend to reprint the mount and let this be fused as part of the offering so there won't be any joints to break. So here's the assembled unit sitting on the yoke of the Mooney. I think this looks great. When the plane is running, there'll be a fair amount of vibration through the yoke, as you know, but it's going to be damped out pretty well. This PET-G is fairly flexible, and I'm pretty confident it will damp out most of the vibrations as it goes forward. You can tip the mount all the way up to get a good view coming down if you choose, or just have it back, pull it out to get a little bit more angle, or to your heart's desire. Big thing for me is I can insert my iPhone 6 Plus directly in with a thin leather case. I don't have to take it out of the case like some of the RAM mounts or some of the other mountings that were available. You can see we're getting some rain here finally in the San Francisco Bay Area. And, you know, frankly, compared to the GPSs we used to fly with, this screen, although smaller than an iPad, is still larger than almost any of the GPSs we used to fly, except maybe the Garmin 696 and 795, which are at this point about 7-year-old technology and getting clunky with very expensive database updates. So this works seamlessly then off of cellular. When I get in the air and it's not on a cellular network anymore, it'll pick up the weather through the Stratus receiver using the FAA broadcast network. And not as high resolution, but still fantastic. So I'm looking forward to flying this, and hope you've enjoyed the video and learned a little bit from it.